we're going to see this week when the coaches release their votes for the reserves on the All-Star team. We'll see if Tim Duncan, who's putting up 15 points, 10 rebounds.
All-Star. I don't even know why we have this conversation.
We'll see if he makes it. But it brought up the conversation on TNT last week that this change in the last 2 years of front court and back court, not forwards, center, and guards, is or is not a good thing. Shaquille O'Neal, one of those guys, said, you got to go back to the old way. He doesn't like front court, back court.
What position he play?
Yeah. So how do you like it?
I think, we were talking about this with Chris Webber.
What's happening to the center position?
The game has just changed. At some point you have to acknowledge that. If you think about the game 20 years ago, 15 years ago, post players played in the paint. When they caught it, there was a foot in the paint. What's happened is now, if you watch how LaMarcus Aldridge, you look how Tim Duncan played, the post now has moved out 15 feet from the basket. Now those guys are more effective in space. And so the game has just changed. If you look at all the elite teams, they all play that way. They still all play an attack below the free throw line, but you just don't have a guy who comes down, who goes to the block, who everybody waits for him to get there. Remember, I like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. You throw it to him, you space the floor, and you let him play. We don't have those types of skills in terms of our players now. Our best post players, more often than not, they're actually perimeter players. Some of our better post players have great perimeter skill. And so our game has just evolved to a point where I think you should have front court and back court. Just like you don't necessarily have to have the dominant point guard. You look at the multiple champions you won, championships, you look at the Bulls, you look at the Heat, they haven't had a pure point guard on those rosters.
But neither All-Star team will start a true center.
No.
All the front court guys voted in by the fans. No, there are no centers in there.
I can make the argument, nor should they.
Yeah.
If we're just breaking down the top front court players, these are our all-stars by starters out west. I mean, someone's going to get snubbed, whether there was a center position or not. The West is so stacked with talent and skilled players, some of the best in the game, that you see, the Eastern Conference has probably the 5 best players in the East, and then you have to try to, really make an argument for another 7 to show up and be on par with these guys. Out West, you got 5 guys in reserve that could probably start in the All-Star game for the West. So to Greg's point, though, I think the game, you feel it's changed. I feel the game is the same, but the style in this era has changed, the way we attack. And I had this conversation with Phil Jackson this past week. We discussed how we attacked in our era, how we created penetration through pass and dribble and shot with offensive rebounds. We don't do that today. And it's not to say that it's you can't win, as we saw the Miami Heat win a championship. We see teams in this league stack up great numbers in regular season wins, but to a man across the board, more teams are playing that style of basketball as opposed to the style we played under.
Y'all had Shaq.
Y'all had Shaq.
If you have Shaq on that block, 2 guys, every player on the floor, if Shaq's on the floor, they have to be a step closer to Shaq. And the help is that when we used to have to play you guys, we had to be a step closer to Shaq than we were to our man. So that step means when you caught it, you had opportunities to attack off the dribble. You couldn't have more penetration. You had more space with which to play.
But this is why a Memphis Grizzlies team, a healthy Memphis Grizzlies team with Marc Gasol and Zebo, who play inside out and defend and have a talented point guard in Mark and Conley, can beat a team that's going to go up and down the floor the last few years and have an up-tempo, wide open, and don't really play a physical style of basketball, because at the end of the day, if you can't control the tempo and slow a team down, you can physically beat them. And if a team's not used to that, they wilt. And so not only Wilt Chamberlain, but they wilt.
I was going to say, Jeremy Levin, our producer, makes an interesting point, too, about the All-Star game. Who's going to jump? The opening tip.
I think you better jump KD for the West. Yeah, oh, Blake Griffin. I'm sorry,
right.
Blake.
Against LeBron?
LeBron?
Yeah,
I would
never
go,
know.
yeah.
Makes
it could
it
happen.
interesting.